Hey everybody, it's Connor with Metal Inside Me. Today's podcast is sponsored by Inkwell Apparel. I am rocking one of their shirts right now. They are originally designed t-shirts, very metal themed. If you're interested, look at some of the stuff they have. Go check out the link in the description. Go follow them on Instagram. Go check out their website. Very dope stuff. Today's podcast, we are interviewing Liam Wilson, the current bassist of metal band Azusa and the former bassist of Dillinger Escape Plan. Let's do it.
There you are.
There you are.
Hey.
Hello.
All right, we'll get
How are
started.
Okay.
So Liam, my name is Connor.
Hi, Connor.
My name is Chris.
We run
Hello,
a
Chris.
YouTube podcast that focuses on metal music, and we interview people and bands and everything. And so we really wanted to reach out to you because Azusa caught my attention, and really enjoyed the new record. And so we just got some questions for you. Can you hear us okay?
Okay. I can. I may have lost your video, but that might be. Oh, there you are. Okay.
There we go.
So just to make something glitched there. You were just saying that you run a metal website or the YouTube channel. I think I saw the review. Yeah. I'm caught up.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So Chris, do you want to kick us off?
Hello.
You've got all 6 strings there, I see.
I do. I decided to fuck around on a guitar tonight.
Nice. Okay. So we know you guys have been together for a few years now, but would you mind just telling us how the band came to be?
Yeah, I'll tell you the longer version, my version. So, Krister and David, the guitar player and drummer, respectively, were in Extol. They're also cousins. They're 2 of the founding members, along with Krister's brother. After they did a record called Synergy, which I was familiar already, but that record really caught my attention. Around that time, Krister left the band. And I guess there was like a 10-year hiatus where I assume they crossed paths, or maybe there was no communication. I don't know, but being family members, I'm not sure how that worked, because David was still in a band with Krister's brother. Anyway, they ran into each other again at a show of another one of Krister's old bands, and they started discussing like, hey, we have some unfinished business. Somewhere in there, they did a record under the name Absurd Squared. It's kind of like a 3-piece thing. So I don't really know where in the timeline that fits. I should, but admittedly I don't. So anyway, they started going back into some of the kind of orphan riffs from the Synergy sessions, and like figuring out what could be the starting point for a new thing. Around, I'm going to say like 2010 or 12, like either like Option Paralysis or One of Us is the Killer recording sessions, I was looking for different source tones to bring to the studio. I was just kind of trying to think of like, what do I want my bass to sound like, or what has like a certain quality or detail that I'm trying to achieve, that I'm trying to hear in my playing that I can't get. And maybe it's an equipment thing. Maybe there's some like secret Norwegian pedal that I need to have. Anyway, I guess it was MySpace at that time. I had reached out to who I thought was the bass player, who responded with something like, I was the bass player at one point, but I definitely didn't track that stuff. I think he maybe took a guess at what he thought it was, and there were no like special bells and whistles that I wouldn't have, filled in the blanks on myself. And he had just said something like, I'll let the band know you're a fan. I'm sure they'd be honored or flattered or something. So fast forward a couple years, Dillinger's kind of wrapping it up, and they reached out. I don't remember who, but it was probably David reached out and just said, "Hey, we have this new material. We think you'd be interested. We think that you would, this is a pitch you can hit. We'd love to work with you." Fast forward a couple months, I hear the demos, and and at this point I'm on board. They were probably like Interstellar Islands, and oh man, I'm still at a point, even though the record's been out, I'm still calling it like Azusa 6 in my, Distant Call. No, not Distant Call. I don't know. Eternal Echo, maybe. Anyway, the details. We were talking about singers, and we had gone back and forth on styles. David had thrown down some like kind of heavy, gruff vocals over some stuff just to kind of get an idea of like a phrasing, or it could sound like this. And some of the stuff we had discussed were like okay ideas, or like that'll work, but at least for me wasn't like fresh. It was just kind of like, this is we're gonna take this great music, and we're just gonna kind of do what everybody else does and get a dude to scream over it. And not saying that that's all that Greg did, but most of the bands I'd been in up to that point were just like a dude screaming at you. And I was just kind of getting stale, at least for me to produce it. I'm still excited by it occasionally, but so also during this time that we're kind of up in the air about singers, I went on tour and filled in for Mirker when she did a US tour. She needed a bass player. So during that experience, I was like, oh, being on stage with a woman has a cool vibe. And like, it's a different dynamic. Being in the van with a woman who's a band member is a different vibe. It's just, and hearing a woman scream at me, hearing like by no means older, but like hearing like a mature woman scream at me triggers me in a different way. Just like as a male, it just does something to my like, it's just baked in that I'm like, startled, triggered, all of the above. So I came back from that tour and mentioned to David, like, hey, just to put it out there, I really thought that was a cool dynamic and would be really into us at least keeping it open to a woman. If, it's not making the search any easier. It always seems like you're either looking for a drummer or a bass player, or, or not in my case, but it seems like every band is always looking for like, it's like 3 easy members and 1 really hard one.
Right.
So fast forward again, David mentioned like, oh, I think I know at least the first person I would ask. I remember seeing Eleni perform in her band Jumbo Jet, and they had like a cool thing going on. She was a good performer, had a good, singing, screaming thing, had like kind of a psychedelic stage presence. And so he reached out to her. She sent some demos back, the same songs I mentioned earlier, I think, and it was just very immediately like, yes, that's it. So I don't want to. I've talked enough out of that one question. I could keep going and just keep telling the story, but I'll let you guys steer the ship.
That makes our job much easier.
Okay.
Thanks for that. So yeah, you brought up a lot of cool points. I mean, exactly what you said is having a woman scream at you is also something that really caught my attention with this music, as well as just the overall sound is like, I had trouble even like trying to box you guys into a subgenre. Like the internet says you guys are progressive extreme metal. What would you guys say you are?
Well, just to kind of have like a quick tag on the end of that last question. I also think, and not calling out names, but I think it was also really important to have a woman who screamed at you like a woman would scream at you, not like a woman who, and no disrespect to the skill set that it takes to scream in a deeper, more masculine way. I'm impressed by that in some cases too, but I think it was really important to have it be like, no, this is definitely a woman screaming at you, you know, and she's trying to sound like a woman screaming at you.
Yeah.
So sorry, the next question quickly.
How would you classify your guys'
Oh, right. Yeah.
genre?
So the two things that we, you know, and tongue firmly in cheek here. But we were saying, I think on Facebook, we put avant thrash. I think somebody recently called it dream grind. I don't know. I mean, any of those will work. I'm pretty open to all of them that I haven't heard before that have like a nice, you know, zing on it. I think our main thing was basically just like, let's not, you know, just lessons I'd learned from being in Dillinger, like, don't always try to fit into the box. More often than not, try to, like, you know, keep one toe in the door, and that's about it. You know, just enough for people to, like, you know, give it a chance, but otherwise it's got to be, you know, I'm trying to create a new genre, or at least a new subgenre. I'm not trying to, you know, I'm trying to have it appeal to those things, but I don't really want to get, you know, lumped in, and that's just what people do, and that's what playlists do. That's just how the brain works. So of course people are going to try to, like, and until there's other bands that fit into your genre too, then it's never going to be, you know, and there can't be. But, you know, so I would call it, you know, any of the things that I mentioned, or just like, you know, I guess it's progressive metal. I guess it's heavy fusion, you know, or distorted fusion. There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of fusiony 70s stuff going on. A lot of what we're listening to is, you know, at least together, the common threads, the overlapping parts of our Venn diagram are like, you know, I mean, Elaney doesn't really listen to much metal at all. You know, it's definitely like not, you know, we're always, anytime we're reading reviews, like on our group chat, or discussing random things, like we'll, you know, the three of us will throw out a reference, and we have to, like, kind of build context, you know, which I find really charming. It's like, it's great that we're like, we can kind of find common ground, but not all be pulling from the same well every time.
So you guys have members from relatively disparate walks of musical life. So I'm just curious what the songwriting process for Azusa is, considering the differences between the bandmates.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple, and given what you're saying, kind of needs to be. I pretty much have free reign over my parts, and Elaney too. But Krister and David write the majority of, like, the song architecture. You know, they get together, not recently, but have been getting together once a week, and just kind of rehearse, you know, kind of working on things on their own. David is very prolific in the sense that, you know, he comes up with a lot of the guitar melodies, comes up with a lot of vocal melodies, and Krister writes, you know, his fair share of lyrics too. So those guys do, like, the lion's share of the heavy lifting. And they just also have, like, a rapport, and they're in the same city, you know, or at least, like, close enough. I'm sure if I lived closer, and there's plans of, like, you know, finances and schedules have made it difficult to just go and, like, kick it in Norway. It's always like, you know, and even if I try to book, like, an extra day, it's like, no, let's go back to the studio. You know, like, I want to make this perfect, or, you know, we have time for one more, you know. So there's usually, like, something in their hard drive, like Skull Chamber, for example, was just, like, something that was in David's hard drive. And he was like, I've always wanted to do something with this. And then, like, a couple hours later, we're, like, halfway through the song, and I'm just, like, learning it as we're tracking it, you know, just to be like, this is cool, let's do it.
Oh man.
So, it kind of runs all over the place. But for the most part, those guys will come up with like a basic chord structure. I would say it's 95% done by the time I hear it. Um, Sometimes that'll come with a like guitar playthrough that's kind of like, here's more or less what I'm doing slow. I'm a very visual person. I like to have that, feedback. Um, and then, Elaney and I will just be in our own separate worlds. I'll track some stuff in a DAW at home and just like loop certain parts and show up in Norway, a little sooner than I would plan to, because David cracks the whip. David has a studio there. We would just kind of hang out in his studio, and it would usually just be like the two of us. Every once in a while, Krister might drop in to have dinner with us one night. Every once in a while, like my visit would overlap with Elaney's visit. So either I would be leaving the night she arrives, or I would be leaving the next morning of the night she arrives, or vice versa. And then we would just kind of do it that way. And then whatever happens in the studio, there's always a lot of room for some adjustment. And occasionally I might say, like, we need to, stretch this out a little bit, or this is actually too long. Let's, like, that's actually good, cut it there, whatever it might be. Maybe occasionally I would have an opinion like that. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, those dudes are, have a pretty clear vision of what they want. And that's kind of what I prefer, or at least that's most of the way that I've always worked. It just kind of seems like every once in a while I'll have like, occasionally there'll be like a section with some bass as like this is what I heard. And I'm humble enough to be like, if it's a better idea, then I'm going to learn that. And if it inspires me to maybe take it another 10%, which is usually what happens anyway. It's like I show up with what I think is at least 95% of the way there. And then through communication and, a more, I guess, focused listening, where it's like, oh, take the drums out. Oh, you've re-recorded the drums. Oh, okay. Well, now that you did that, I'm going to do, what do you think of this? And then I don't know. I don't know if you're musicians and have, if you've edited anything in your life, a podcast, it's like, that sometimes the best shit ends up on the cutting room floor and some other thing happens. And you're like, oh, well, that was really cool. And,
Right.
I like to think that we save a lot of room for the muse. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's the four of us in the band, but there's definitely like a fifth personality that just kind of enters
Yeah.
in the studio, which is cool,
Yeah.
and there's enough woo beliefs floating around this band to, you know, light not light the candles literally, but we get weird.
Right. And is that songwriting process somewhat similar to what you were used to with Dillinger, or is it a bit of a new experience?
I mean, Dillinger floated all kinds of different ways. At different times I was more involved in like a songwriting rehearsing thing. At different, for Option Paralysis, we were jamming a lot of that live. Like Billy, Ben, and I would play together a lot, and like they were living together at the time. They would write a lot together. I would show up, run through it, go home, work it out. Other albums, it was a little bit more like every man for himself. Here's the demos, here's at least some drums and guitar, maybe some programmed drums, maybe some programmed a lot, and we'll see you in 2 months kind of thing. And I just kind of trust the producer a lot. A lot of Dillinger stuff, it was like pretty closed sessions. So like when Ben's recording guitar, I wasn't in the room, and vice versa. Occasionally you might stop in and be like, wait, I have a question about one thing, like, I thought you were doing this. Now that I'm hearing it, you're doing this. What are you doing? That kind of stuff. So I'm used to having a decent amount of autonomy, but trusting the producer. With Dillinger, Steve Evans was a bass player. So it was kind of like going and, having like a really cool lesson. In a lot of ways, that guy, mentored me, especially early years stuff, just like really dug into me about my shitty picking technique in the early years. And Um, yeah, yeah. So I mean, and with John From, just as another example, like that was all like everybody would get in my basement every like Monday afternoon for like almost 6 years. We would just like meet up basically for lunch and like bash it out in real time. And it took forever. But I also think that like what happened was cool, and it built like a really cool dynamic between the three of us. And, so that was a totally different thing. But, and fast forward now, that's almost all happening on Zoom, or FaceTime, where like the guitar player and I are like getting together, twice a week just to be like, okay, let's try to pretend we're a band, which I think is what everybody's doing right now. And like a year from now, we're going to have the coolest no latency live jamming app because some engineer is just going to get fed up. So uh, it makes it cool because a lot of the musicians I work with don't live right near me.
Mm-hmm.
And, with Dillinger, it was 2 hours up, 2 hours back, sometimes twice a week, and then a 2 hour or 3 hour practice in the middle. It was like half my day. So I would rather be using that time to shed, and really just like, let me make this even crazier. Not that,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I played what I wanted to play, but, it would have been cooler to have more time. But there again, I don't know. I got a lot of listening done
Mm-hmm. So,
pre-podcasts.
so for Loop of Yesterdays, is there a unified concept that the album is about?
Um, yeah, I don't, I'll try to put it into like a few words.
Mm-hmm.
And not to sound scatterbrained, but I think everybody in the band had a very, let's say, ripe year and a half since Heavy Yoke, and even you know bleeding over into those years too. I think we all went through individually, like completely differently, and in some ways, like polar opposite um, high highs and low lows. Um, I think it's a very, and I'm trying to sound, or I should say, I'm trying not to sound like washed up white dad, talking about my music career or something. But I do feel like this is like the most adult record I've ever written. I feel like the things that we were all dealing with are like, you don't deal with this when you're a teenager. It's like when you're a teenager and somebody like breaks up with you because you were dating for 4 months, and next thing you know, she's making out with your best friend at a party or something. It's like, it just seems kind of cute. But like when you're 40-ish and there's like an affair and divorce or disease or a miscarriage, a birth, you know what I mean, like just the, the stakes just feel higher. So kind of juggling some of that like adult theme stuff and like the joys and the pitfalls of that. um yeah, I just kind of think it's probably the most, I don't want to say literal, but I can't think of a time where I was in a band with people who were going through so much like internal transition and change and strife. And not to say that Dillinger didn't have its own drama or people going through different things at different times, but in some ways, like looking back, it all seemed kind of cute. And it was
Right.
like, and it was kind of more frustrated and angry. And this is kind of more like sad, or just like, that fucking sucks, is kind of, or like, that is fucking beautiful. Congratulations. It was
Mm-hmm.
really just like, um, just a lot of emotion went into it, I guess. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel somewhat limited to like pull everyone's file,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but just trying to verify the fact that yeah, it was just a heavy year and a half, and heavy times call for heavy jams.
Yeah,
Right.
um
that's
and I think some of it's like lyrically it's there, if you're
mhm,
listening to it, and you're really catching what's flying by. I think you can kind of start to like, and there's some other like little Easter eggy things in there that I think, if we ever did like a director's cut narration, like, oh, well, this is the part where we sampled this, it would kind of be like, oh, cool. Now I understand.
mhm.
I don't know.
Right.
That's really interesting, especially because I think the music communicates that message very well. Just the straight music itself, just the way. I mean, even without hearing the lyrics and knowing exactly what's being said, you feel like sad at times during the music, and
Yeah.
I kind of like felt exactly what you explained while listening to the record.
Uh,
Yeah.
then, you know, goal achieved. I
Yeah.
think Tolstoy. I want to say it's Tolstoy says something like, art is like when the artist has an emotion and is able to communicate that to the audience. Or when the audience has the same feeling,
Hmm.
then it's like, oh, okay, achieved. Um, Yeah, I think this is, like I said, kind of one of the more literal things that I can be like, and some of it was also like, I don't again, I don't know if you're making art yourselves, but I'm sure somebody listening to this is, and sometimes you do something and then it's almost like you're doing something artistically and then like weeks or months later, sometimes not, maybe not even that long, you like have this kind of aha moment where you're like, holy shit, it's like a premonition. Like all of this was like foreshadowing stuff. Like there was stuff in my life personally that didn't really come to full head until we were mixing the record and
Hmm.
like talking about the artwork. And then it was just like, oh shit, like that's fucked up, or like, oh man, like these lyrics hit me so much harder. Like I didn't even write these lyrics, but these lyrics are like describing so much about what I'm dealing with right now too, or like how I'm feeling. So it was just an interesting record. Like I said, I just feel very connected to it on an
Hmm.
emotional level, and not just like, oh, I wrote this cool riff, or like, oh, my ego was like, I think a lot of other times in my career, it was a lot more ego driven, whether it was like, I fucking suck and I gotta step it up, or I'm fucking awesome. I'm just gonna keep being awesome. This was way more like humble, emotional, like let's make some fucking music you can hum, and that like there's certain spots where like when we all just like land on this one thing where Elaine's singing this note, I'm hitting this note, David's doing, you know what I mean? It just hits in this like ugly, or just like, oh, I didn't feel that coming, or something, or like I feel weird right now.
Hmm.
I don't
Right. Yeah. Right. So, so would you say that this new record is 100% muse driven, and how does that compare to the previous record?
know. Well, I think to have the muse, you know, it, to actually like invite the muse in, I think takes a certain amount of comfort and trust, in that, like whoever you're working with is also going to call in like the same muse, or a muse that gets along with your muse. Uh, when we wrote the last record, or when we at least constructed the last record, a lot of it was already kind of put together by the time Eleni and I got it. And I barely knew David and Krister or Eleni as people. Um, some email chats. But I remember like getting off the plane when I first landed in Norway, like what are these guys gonna think of me? Like this is gonna be so weird. And just kind of having my own idea of what I thought of them, and what I thought they were gonna think of me, and what I think of me, and all of the above. And then Eleni too, because I was saying, sorry, uh, she and I would kind of be ships in the night getting into Norway. So we barely got to know each other than like shooting a video, or like, doing band press, doing things that you do like when you're a band, but we kind of didn't quite feel like that gel thing. Like we had made music, we had done all the things that a band does to make themselves feel like a band, other than just like hanging out and shooting the shit, like as a group. It was always like me and David, or David and Krister, or like David and Eleni were in the studio. So Krister and I would go out, or those guys were speaking Norwegian. So Eleni and I would go like walk over here and do something.
Right.
And trying to like make time to do it, but like in these very limited bubbles. So this time around, I think we just kind of had a better idea of each other's personalities, what we wanted to do artistically, just like what I like, kind of like the female vocalist thing. It was like, well, that's new to me, and I want to do that. So that checks off one of my boxes. This part in this song, I feel like I've played that 10 times. We got to change it. I don't want to just, like, I think it's funny when people compare the band to Dillinger, because I'm like, I didn't write any of this, and I didn't write any of that either. If me being on it makes it sound like Dillinger, sure. But, like I have like I have hardly any say in either band, other than like maybe an artistic thing. Like I'll stick my head in, as you can tell, I'm a talker. So I have an opinion about everything, and I'm happy to articulate my opinion very fervently, but I'm also pretty like, hey, whatever, like I've said my opinion, take it or leave it. So anyway, just circling back to your question, it was just mostly just like getting to know each other on a personal level, getting to know how each other works. um if we make Eleni do these kind of harmonies, it's going to be harder. If she does something more natural, it's going to go like this. I'm playing something, I don't really do that kind of thing very well, but I do this really well, so I'm going to lean on this kind of stuff. um I like to work at this time of day, I need a coffee and a this first. It's like, once you just kind of get to know everybody's like
Mhm.
little things, it like just flows easier. So there was less of the like getting to know you, and more just like, let's fucking do this. And I know that you're gonna knock this out of the ballpark. Like, the second time I didn't go into the studio as rehearsed, partly because I trust what's gonna happen. I know that I'm like ready, and I want to save more room for like something to happen, because if I show up too prepared, then I'm just like doing it.
Mhm.
And David especially is like just so full of ideas that it's like, well, I almost don't want to show up with anything anymore, and just like, like Skull Chamber, like I said, like I didn't rehearse it. I was like kind of just, learning pieces of it as we were going. And it was cool the way it all turned out. So
Yeah. So we don't want to take up too much of your time, but
sure. Yeah.
one thing we have to ask about is we were about to see you performing live with Devin Townsend.
Oh yeah.
On the day we were hours away from the show. I believe it was the first show in Nashville that got
Well,
postponed.
I gotta say, I wouldn't have been there.
Ah, dang.
I don't or I wouldn't have started until like next week.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
I was only going to do the or at least I've only been invited to do the European festival
Mhm.
stuff. So yeah, he I think he initially wanted us to do that, like
Mhm.
the lineup that he had for European stuff. I think he did want to do the US stuff, but for different reasons, management, crew, whatever it was, like they just went with the lineup that they had,
Mhm.
which was fine, because I don't even think I got asked until, like it would have been, I never would have had time to get that set together. And yeah, but either way, still disappointing.
Mhm.
um I haven't had a formal conversation like it's definitely off, but I'm 95% sure it's off. And I think that some of it is just like festivals are waiting for governments to say, we're done, so then
Mhm.
they can maybe get some insurance money or something. I don't know. But I know that that's just like a house of cards that has probably already fallen, because we couldn't even leave the country. It's not even like I can fly out anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope that that is all rescheduled. It was cool getting to do like a little quarantine jam, but even it sucks because even like some of my gear that I would have taken on that tour is getting repaired right now for the tour that's not going to happen. And so I didn't even have like my go-to, like my sled dogs, like my
Mhm.
so yeah, I mean, this whole thing has just been super weird. I hope it gets rescheduled. There's no doubt that this is all going to be very weird and shaky, and um I don't know whether to take the red pill or the blue pill myself, but I do know that people are going to get really weird getting in crowds.
Yeah.
um if I thought any of the like the Great White, you know, venue burning down thing, or even like some of these like mass shootings. It's like if that kind of stuff, like, I mean, things did go back to normal. There's part of me that hopes that things go back to a more aware normal. But I guess that's to be seen.
Mhm.
Right.
All we need is one person getting sick at a venue, and then the whole industry pretty much falls apart.
Mhm.
Right.
With liability and everything. It's like, you know, I don't
Yeah.
know.
And on that same note, are there any plans for Azusa going forward?
More of the same. I mean, it would be nice to go out and support our record and play some more shows. And, we're actively looking, for us, it makes more sense to do support tour things. For us to go headline, uh, for my soul, it would be great. It would be humbling, but I think just logistically to get everybody together and make it worth it, it's like we kind of need to do like at least 2 weeks of shows, 2 to 3 weeks of shows. And it's just easier when we're opening for somebody, at this
Mhm.
stage, and with the experience, eh, the experience that we have as a band. I mean, collectively, we probably have more experience than a lot of the bands we'd be touring with, but
Yeah.
um, I would like to kind of support somebody else. So a lot of it was based on that, or doing more festival stuff. And at the moment, that's, it's not happening. I was definitely looking forward to, I shouldn't say looking forward. I was definitely planning on pulling the friend card, trying to ask a bunch of bands that I know, like, hey, I see you're going on tour. You know, I remember when Dillinger took your band on tour. How about you take my band on tour?
Yeah.
Um, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And yeah, again, that's probably not going to happen. The other thing about support tours in a situation like that is like, I kind of just want to go tour with people I know and like. Not to say I wouldn't go on a tour with people I didn't know and like, but it would be really cool to like go out with my friends. Um, Azusa definitely feels like it's a little bit more of a victory lap. Dillinger was always like, we smelled blood in the water, and we were always out for it.
Right.
And it just like, there's just a certain amount of pressure that like, I just don't know if I need that in my life right now. It's kind of toxic at times. It makes, I don't want everything to feel so kind of urgent and competitive. I enjoyed the shows that Azusa played already, because it was just like, yo, let's go have fun. And we did.
Right.
Mhm.
And we still delivered, most of the time. And yeah, so I mean, I would love to get back out on the road. In the meantime, it's probably more writing and recording. But there again, it's like, I don't know when the next time I'm going to get to Norway is. I guess you got to like lift an international flight ban before I can go anywhere. Um, but as long as a label, as long as we have somebody who wants to help us put out a record, then I can't imagine us not at least recording more.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I would like to see where it goes. I definitely think, I really enjoy making music with these people. It's, it's really cool to, meet people that you have been listening to, like I'm a fan of them as musicians. And now that I know them, and it's like, it's really quick how fast you can get extended family. You know,
Mhm.
you dig a few trenches together, and it's like nothing but war stories for the rest of your life. Um, so yeah, I don't know. I don't necessarily have anything final to say other than, you know, thanks for the interview, thanks for the review, thanks for the attention. Thanks to anybody listening who has the record. Thanks to anybody who is about to go listen to it. Yeah, follow us on social media, Spotify, all those places. It does make a difference. Yeah, happy quarantine, y'all.
Thank you so much, Liam.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was really great to talk to you.
Really
yeah, you
appreciate
too.
it. Yeah.
Right on.
All
Well,
right.
Thanks.
keep doing what you do. Have a good
That's
night.
See
right.
ya.
We will
Yeah.
see Azusa if they ever come in our area.
All right. For
Absolutely.
now, it'll be a Zoomsa.
Perfect. All right.
All right.
Thanks.
Talk to you soon.
See ya.
See ya.